you, David, for your kind words, and thank you, David, for believing in me, because it's been quite a journey to get to this point where there is a book, and I might have given up, I think, if it hadn't been David kind of coming back. We had our moments, mind you. It didn't always work out, but it has worked out. For that, I'm extremely grateful.
So am I.
And thank you, Bernadette, for your words. I was almost tempted to buy the book. Very good. It's lovely when someone reads what you've written and gets what you were talking about. And I think Bernadette got that, and I think that's great to find out that can actually happen. You talked about circling and spiralling, and I've written down in the book, I've got my life spirals and circles in and around family and friends, and relationships are entwined with my feminine DNA. Now, women are relational, and when they get together, they talk about connection and brokenness, and about love and work, and about experiences of powerlessness and vulnerability. Their words never move in a straight line. Backwards and forwards they go, now repeating themselves before moving on with another connection, then returning again to the beginning. To the listening male, it can seem disconnected, fragmented, and repetition that never goes anywhere. But it's always about the ever-changing dimensions of relationship. And that's the beginning. I wanted to say that A Gentle Unfolding is a memoir of sorts. And like the words say, it goes backwards and forwards and roundabout and keeps going back. And I did give some of it to somebody to read once, and they said, oh, you should just keep going. And I thought, no, that's what I'm doing. That's how I write. But of course, it's not a bearing of the soul or a warts and all roundup of my life either. Just as well, because I can never remember what I was doing or on what date, or how old I was when something happened, when it happened. Zadie Smith, who's I think she's an English writer, she calls that a non-memory system. Oh, I've got it. It's awash in bits and pieces of the past that bump into the present. Memory is not reliable. What I recall, writing in this book, is not the actual event, but echoes of it, fragments and shadows of it. Now, most of the people here this afternoon, when I've looked around, are a living, breathing memory timeline of my life, starting with my brothers and going all the way up to Sophia Circle, sitting over here. There's such representation there of people who've been part of my life and at various stages. It's quite extraordinary, and it's actually something that mostly happens at funerals. And when it's too late for the person who's there to remember for a talk fest about it. So I want to say thank you to all of you for being here and for being representative of so many times and spaces in my life. You may remember some of the things I write about in the book, but your memories of it will probably be different to mine. So in the interest of privacy, and so you won't sue me, I rarely mention names. I've steered clear of it, I think, anyway. Don't tell me if I haven't. So, how come a woman who's neither rich, famous, well-known or influential, or got sister in front of her name, have the effrontery to write a book? It isn't exactly religious. It had never gathered Catholic imprimatur, you know, those words that assure a reader it is doctrinally free from error. It probably isn't. No. I want to tell you a small story here, and she's looking at me now. When Mary Jane, my daughter down there, was about, she was about mid-secondary, it got back to me, probably via a teacher, I can't remember, but it got back to me that they were talking in class about what their mothers did. And when it came to Mary Jane's turn, she said, "Oh, my mother, she works for the church. She's religious." Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not particularly religious. I never have been. I don't think I came from a very religious family, actually. I know, you know what it says. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. You know that saying here? Yeah. Well, I think religious is an umbrella word for a whole lot of practices and beliefs, and I'm not strong on them. Anyway, so it's not a religious book, really. And it doesn't have the tragedy or salacious detail to appeal to the commercial market. I did try somewhere else with a few chapters once, asked them about printing it, and they said, "Oh, we'd like you to rewrite it, we want loads more detail." No, didn't do it. But God is at the centre of it all. So actually, this book, I suppose, is about Christian spirituality. God is unpredictable. How else do I explain the fact that when I was just 16, and in the terminology of the day, I assumed I had a vocation to religious life, and I trotted off to a convent to learn how to be a nun. Nobody questioned it, least of all me. But 16 years later, no longer an adolescent, I exchanged my habit and veil for a very fetching knee-length crinoline, orange it was, crinoline number, and returned to Melbourne, and the murmurs comment at the time kind of followed me over quite a long time. She's lost her vocation. I hadn't. In the years that followed, I gradually came to understand that the Christian vocation is twisted through with invitations and challenges. It's the stuff of everyday life. I decided I'd like to write my experience of those years, putting it in a framework of the events, influences and places that have backgrounded and coloured my life. I've written about those years and the experiences that marked them because I believe that many women and men, people like me who left religious life after Vatican II, took their vocation, their formation, their education and the deep commitment that took them first into the priesthood or religious life and poured it into new ministries, new ways of being church, of living their baptismal commitment. I believe those years were unique. Later generations will look back and analyse their importance. Scholars and theologians will write papers and books about the way lay ministry of those years began to offset the clerical abuse scandals. They will measure the effect all this had on the development of what I hope will be a more grown-up Australian church. I find writing, whether it's a book or a blog, to be a confidence-shaking business at the best of times. Putting into words the things I value most for strangers, and worse still for family, and inviting their assessment of experiences that are personal, takes time and courage. My life and my faith is ordinary, and so are the words I use. As Andrew Hamilton said in a piece in Eureka Street just this Friday, in much of my own writing, I've been concerned to interpret Christian faith for a public audience in a public language. Me too. Or are those two words now copyright? Good books can inspire, affirm, challenge, change, and maybe even disturb. And maybe even sell lots of copies. I hope that A Gentle Unfolding might be one of those books. And thank you again so much for your support.